and it is my pleasure to introduce Dese'Rae L Stage. So thank you so much, Des, for being with us today. Dese'Rae L Stage is an award-winning artist, mom, and suicidologist. She created Live Through This, a multimedia storytelling series that aims to reduce prejudice and discrimination against suicide attempt survivors. Live Through This reminds us that suicide is a human issue by elevating and amplifying survivors' voices through raw, honest stories of survival and pairing them with portraits. Live Through This has received media coverage from the New York Times, NPR, CNN, Vice News, CBS Evening News, and more. Dese'Rae produces and co-hosts the video podcast Suicide and Stuff with Jess Stolman-Rainey, who you all met yesterday. She also created the Suicide Media Bot, a bot on Twitter that tweets about suicide-safe messaging, and she maintains I Hurt Myself Today, a self-injury resource built by people with lived experience of non-suicidal self-injury for people with lived experience of self-injury. I will share a couple things in the chat so folks are familiar, and I will pass it over to Des.
Unmute.
Thank you, Erica.
Yeah. Everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So, hi, I'm Des. Dese'Rae, I go by Des. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I want to open with a land acknowledgement. The land I'm presenting from today is part of the traditional unceded territory of the Lenape people. The Lenape are one of the oldest tribes in the northeastern US. They had a reputation for being a peace-loving community, known for being diplomats. They were hospitable toward the first colonizers, but of course, eventually they were threatened, murdered, and forcibly removed from their lands and pushed westward. Most of them live in Oklahoma now, though as of the most recent census, 13,000 Philadelphians identify as Native American, including the Lenape, Cherokee, Creek, and Cree tribes. So this is me, 37 years old, cranky, shaking. I've been doing public speaking for years and years, and I still hate it. It scares me. So we're here together.
Got this.
I'm a photographer, a writer. I'm a newly minted MSW student, studying to be a clinician, which is a really interesting in juxtaposition to the work I've been doing for the last decade. I'm a suicidologist. I am originally from Miami, but I've lived in tons of places, all over Florida, Tennessee for a few years, New York City for nearly a decade before that, and now Philadelphia, which I think is probably home. I'm a daughter. It's my mom on my wedding weekend. And I am a sibling. I meant to turn off my sounds on my Facebook, so hopefully you guys aren't hearing that. I don't know if I believe in soulmates, but if they're real, I'm almost positive I found and then married mine. I locked it down. I like tattoos, beer and bourbon, documentaries, true crime, memoirs, and podcasts about all of these things. I'm a huge music fan. Indie, top 40, country, Motown, alternative, you name it, I like it. I love Tori Amos, Taylor Swift, Dolly Parton. I'm a mom to these two amazing, infuriating, hilarious babies who are exactly 15 months apart. This is all of us. Gus, and my wife carried Gus, and this is Theo, and I carried Theo. She was born last April. All this together. I could show you pictures of my babies all day. I'm not going to do that. But all of this to say, my life is amazing, and it's everything I could have ever wished for, and far, far beyond. But there's other stuff too. Suicide has been a part of my life since I was a kid. I think like anything else, suicide, or maybe more than anything else, suicide is complicated, and I've seen it from a lot of different angles. And that compelled me to dedicate my life to trying to change it. I think this is actually a good time for me to introduce Live Through This to you, so I'm going to do that with a video. I am having trouble getting PowerPoint to cooperate with me in terms of getting captions in these videos, so we're going to chat, not tweet. We're going to chat out a message with a link to the YouTube videos where you can get captions.
Live Through This is a series of portraits and true stories of suicide attempt survivors across the United States. So the catalyst for starting the project was personal experiences I had with depression, with self-injury, with my own suicide attempt, and I also lost friends to suicide. And I noticed that we don't talk openly about our personal experiences with suicide and with suicidal thoughts and suicidal feelings. And I just wanted to change that.
Live Through This is important because it's important for people to see that there's hope after an attempt and that there's people out there like them and they're not alone. Not feeling alone is a big deal as a human being.
If people don't understand it, this might give them a chance to see, like, you know, there's a human here. You know, it is something I think that a lot of people maybe deal with at some point in time, and it's nice to just have some solidarity there for them and with them, you know?
A lot of suicide attempt survivors have never told the story from front to back because they've never been encouraged to. So I give them that space. And afterwards, I make a portrait.
To see people's souls within their eyes, it was amazing. To be able to create that bond that you're not alone, it could help so many others.
I've seen suicide from so many different angles, and so I understand it from an academic perspective, but more importantly, I understand it from lived experience, from a very personal perspective. So when I sit down with somebody and they tell me their story, they know that they're sitting with somebody who's been there too.
When I found the project, I thought, wow, fantastic. You know, this is a way for me to talk without somebody giving me a really strange look or trying to give me medication or trying to lock me up or telling me how wrong I was about something.
And to be able to have a conversation with someone else who's experienced that, you know, you're not going to be judged. And to be able to open up and be honest about that experience, I felt like I was being heard with every single word.
I want people to come away understanding suicide better or wanting to understand it better. I want them to be more open to talking about it because one thing we know is that asking about suicide saves lives.
And we just need to reach out and say, we can talk about it, we can approach it, it does happen, and the more we're scared of it, the more difficult it can be for people who face it because they know they have nowhere to go. And that feeling of having nowhere to go and no one to speak with kind of makes it worse in the first place.
It connects us to our stories, not only for the stories that we're reading of other attempt survivors, but the stories that are untold within ourselves. And it gives us hope and an opportunity to know that recovery is possible.
The story's ready to be told to everybody. Get it out there. Let people see that I'm a regular human being.
When I listen to the stories of suicide attempt survivors like me, I don't hear weakness. I don't hear selfishness. I hear courage. I hear compassion. I hear resilience. I hear survival. I hear life. You know, this project is not about death. This project is about life. That's why I called it Live Through This.
The people who are on that brink, they say, like, listen, like, there's a whole nother side to this. There is so much love in the world still. So, like, soldier on, man. You know what I mean?
I'm redeemed.
If you like that song, look up Charlotte Martin. She is one of my favorite singers in the whole world, and I think that song, she's a little more religious than I generally am, but that song really, I think, speaks to the experience of suicide really beautifully. I love it so much I have the word "as she wrote it out" tattooed on my arm. Like, that's how I feel about it.
What is her name again, so I can put it in the chat?
Charlotte Martin.
Okay.
So it's important to me that we center the voices of lived experience in order not only to create community and peer support, which is the goal of Live Through This specifically, but to flesh out the complexity and explore the nuances of suicide. I've had few experiences in my life that felt as truly lonely and isolating as being suicidal, and I was trying to think of comparable experiences for people who may not have had the experience of being suicidal. And one I can think of is losing a parent. I can't do this. This is hard. I lost my grandfather in April, and he was my dad. He raised me. This is him with my babies. As you can imagine, thanks to COVID, my family didn't get to grieve the way that we should have. But that kind of loss, of losing a part of who you are, of your history, of the possibility that there are questions about you or your family that you might have one day that you will never, ever get answered, of the memories that are gone that they took with them. That is an experience that cannot be known without being felt. And I think suicide is the same. Even if we knew everything there was to know about suicide, and we do not, there is a certain quality to the feeling, to the lived experience that informs and completes our knowing of a thing. And I don't think we can have one without the other. Based on my work and my studies over the past decade, I firmly believe that no one is immune to this. So to me, that complete kind of knowing that I'm talking about is imperative to making any kind of change. And that knowing requires the leadership of people with lived experience of suicidality. So I'm going to tell you my story, and I'm going to talk about Live Through This and how they all weave together, and it's going to be messy and great. The first time that I experienced suicide or was exposed to suicide was the butcher at Winn-Dixie. He was a coworker of my grandmother's. She was the deli manager, and they were friends. I was 2 or 3 at the time. And it's one of my first memories. I loved him. And I remember my family talking pretty openly about what had happened. I remember my grandmother talking about his wife and his daughter that he left behind, and where he was found, and how he did it, and what a shame it was. And that stuck with me. And then I was supposed to have a slide in between here. The transition from middle school to high school for me was really difficult. I stopped sleeping at night. I started sleeping in class. I started failing classes, which had never happened to me before. I even managed to fail marching band once. My relationships with my parents suddenly felt impossible to navigate. My friends were all dating. I was questioning my sexuality. I was so lonely. I experienced depression for the first time. I had suicidal thoughts for the first time. I started hurting myself to feel better. This is my friend Brian. When I was in 10th grade and he was in 11th, Brian took his own life. And it sent me into this spiral of grief. I remember I'd come out of my bedroom, and for dinner, we always had dinner at the same time every day. And my grandmother would ask me, "Why do you care so much about this kid? He was stupid, he was selfish." And it seemed obvious to me why I cared. I cared because I'd lost my friend who felt alone and who was in pain and who didn't know how to ask for help or didn't feel he could ask for help. He was never coming back. And it seemed obvious to me. All of that seemed obvious to me, but what she couldn't see, I guess, was that I was also feeling all of those things. I didn't think I could ask for help because I was just a kid, and the things that I was feeling couldn't compare to the adult problems that I saw around me. The gambling and the substance use and cops at 2 a.m. and 72-hour psych holds. How could anything that I was feeling compare to that? This is awkward, but it's good for a laugh. From the perspective of the 37-year-old standing here today, I'm sitting here. I don't think we give enough credence to the complex inner lives of teenagers and young people. Every feeling is amped up, and everything feels big and hard and lonely because it's the first time, and you are clearly the only one who has ever felt this. I think we forget that as we get older, and we invalidate young people when we should really be supporting them and lifting them up. I attempted suicide for the first time in the summer of 2000, probably around the time the picture on the right was taken. Please note my red beeper in my pocket. I was in the middle of one of many of my breakups with my first love. And it was also around that time that we were outed against our will. And my girlfriend's mom threatened to kill me when she found out. I have no recollection of this. I found out when I was going through an old journal. I didn't mention suicide expressly in it, but what I did describe was pretty clearly a suicide attempt. I moved to Orlando for college, but as before, I did not handle this transition well. To be fair, we all know what happened that fall. I think 9/11 is sort of like my generation's JFK. You know, we remember. For me, it was this bright blue sky Tuesday morning. I just failed my first college chemistry test. I subsequently failed the rest of them too. I heard on the news what had happened and I thought the world was ending. I had nightmares for weeks. I was homesick and I'd call my parents and I'd cry. Still wasn't sleeping, still hurting myself. I failed every class but one that semester. And when I went home for winter break, that was when we decided that it was time for me to see someone. And so they took me to my family doctor and he said, "Are you sad a lot? Are you sleeping more than usual? Have you gained a lot of weight? Do you cry a lot?" And I answered the questions and he handed over a prescription for an antidepressant with no further conversation. So depression was my first diagnosis. The next spring, things just got worse. And that was the impetus for me to seek therapy for the first time. I come from hard workers who keep their heads down and live their lives privately. Therapy just wasn't a thing we did. I don't even think it wasn't a thing that we didn't do. It just never entered anyone's mind as an option. If ignoring your problems or trying to think positively about them didn't fix it, then there was a pill for that. And that was just how we handled it. So seeking therapy didn't come naturally to me. It was really a learning process and it didn't go well at first, as it often doesn't. I think it would have been really helpful for me to know that finding the right therapist is kind of like dating. You have to go on a lot of first dates. You have to meet a lot of duds before you find the right one. And that's if you have the privilege of access or choice. It went on like this for years. Sometimes I was in therapy because I had access through school. Sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I was on meds because I had insurance. Sometimes I wasn't because they made me feel like a zombie. And my coping skills were awful. Everything hurt and I didn't know how to change it. So 2003, I met this girl and we had this whirlwind summer romance, but she had to go back to school in Tennessee in the fall and we met in Florida. I walked away from everything to be with her, school, my family, everything I'd ever known. So she was all I had and I clung to her. And that was the beginning of a really dangerous cycle of codependence for us. I waited tables full time and I started to have these unrelenting panic attacks. Our relationship became volatile pretty quickly and our lives became more and more intertwined. We lived together, we worked together, we went to school together, we shared a bank account, had the same friends, we never left each other's sides. And then one day she threatened to hit me and I left, but I came back. And another day she pushed me. Then she hit me in places where the bruising wouldn't be visible because my clothing covered it. And then one day she punched me and I had a black eye. And at some point in the middle of all of that, I started hitting back. And there's probably nothing else that's made me hate myself in the same way as that, because it made me question everything about who I was and who I thought I was. So I fought hard to change that. I gave ultimatum after ultimatum about how we needed to get better, about how people who loved each other shouldn't hurt each other, but it did not get better. And I couldn't figure out how to leave. I fell further and further into this hole. I was working full-time, going to school full-time, living in fear of our next argument. I was terrified she was going to leave me, and I couldn't fathom being alone. The suicidal thoughts became an everyday occurrence instead of just a sometimes occurrence. And I moved forward, but I couldn't see past the day I was living. And that happened for 2 years. I bought a car to escape the fights, but then the car became a weapon. I would fantasize about different things. I would fantasize about faking an accident so no one would know that I just wanted to die. Somewhere in the middle of this mess, I found an amazing therapist, truly top 3 best therapists I've ever had. And I think she kept me alive. Saw a psychiatrist for the first time, got a new diagnosis, bipolar disorder type 2. Got some new meds to add to my old ones, but none of that lasted long because I was getting my help through the University Counseling Center, and access was limited. I'm sure this is not a new story. I had 8 sessions to fix all of that. So in the summer of 2006, after I graduated, I learned that my girlfriend was cheating on me and everything just unraveled. I attempted suicide again. That evening, she happened to be elsewhere and she wouldn't come home, but she did call the cops for a welfare check without telling me. And they barged into my apartment demanding to know who I was and what I'd done, as if I'd committed a crime. And I was so terrified of these strangers in my house. I was so terrified of being locked up that I could not speak. I remember picking up my phone and calling my mom and just kind of handing the phone to the cops. And she eventually handed it back to me. And she said, hey, look, you don't have a choice anymore. You are going to the hospital tonight. The one choice you do have is whether you're going to cooperate. And if you don't cooperate, they're going to handcuff you and they're going to put you in a police cruiser and they're going to take you to the hospital themselves. So I chose not to go with that option. I was loaded into an ambulance. No one talked to me. Spent a few hours alone in a cold beige hospital room. Texts at that time were still 25 cents each. So, that wasn't happening. I barely had reception. So I was kind of left with myself. And I realized that things needed to change and I needed to stop hurting myself. And that meant leaving this relationship. It meant no more cutting. It meant I had to find a way out of these obsessive, relentless suicidal thoughts. And if I didn't, I probably would die. Oh, the hospital experience. The hospital experience was really scary in the moment, but I have heard so many stories that are just beyond. My experience was brief. It's really disheartening to me that people who need help are humiliated, treated with resentment, forcibly restrained physically and chemically by people who are supposed to be helping us. Based on the quality of care I received that night, I feel extra lucky that I did not spend time in a locked unit as well. As an example, here's what I walked away from the hospital with that evening. These are my discharge papers. A little description of depression, things I was not familiar with, some abrasions. This isn't even the full picture of what happened. So even the documentation is off, but let me zoom in. These are my follow-up instructions. They're very small on the second page. Follow up in 1 day. Here's the number they gave me to call, 000-000-0000. So had I felt compelled by the help that I was given, had I decided to follow those instructions, no one would have been there for me. I don't know if you've tried that number. I'm pretty sure it doesn't work. To add insult to injury, I got a $1,500 bill for that 10-minute ambulance ride a few weeks later. And that made things even worse because I didn't have $1,500. I was 23 years old. What helped me was the kindness and support I received from people who loved me. That's what got me through that experience. It was my mom making sure I had a ride home from the hospital, even though she was in Florida and I was in Tennessee. It was my friend Allison leaving a party very, very, very drunk with a sober friend who I didn't know at all to come get me at the hospital. It was my best friend wiring me money and saying, come to me, I will take care of you. So a week later, I packed all of my things into my car. I quit my job. I drove 16 hours to get to my best friend in Texas. And she took care of me for the next month while I started to rebuild. This is us probably right after I got to Texas. I look much happier than I felt. After Texas, I moved back home to Miami briefly. I grieved my breakup. One of my best friends died from suicide. I grieved that. I rarely visited my family, even though we were in the same city. I made some really aggressively reckless decisions. one of those decisions, one of the last decisions I made in Miami, was to move to New York with only what would fit in my car, to a room in an apartment that I had never seen, with 3 roommates I had never met. And the apartment was actually not in New York City at all, but across the Hudson River in New Jersey. Also, I had $1,000, which was just, no one was making good decisions here. $1,000 gets you nowhere in New York. I had no friends when I got there, but I did have a camera. I was lonely, depressed, grieving, broke, unemployed. I had been dabbling in photography as a hobby since I lived in Tennessee, and my camera became my lifeline. It was the thing that I used to cope, and I took it with me everywhere. The suicidal thoughts came and went. Mostly I didn't cut myself, but sometimes I did, and then I would feel like I had to start over and forgive myself. I've kind of moved beyond looking at it that way, but that was how it felt then. You know, it was the only coping skill I had for 9 years, and it worked. And I think that's the scariest part of self-injury for a lot of people, is that that it works. It allowed me to make emotional pain physical. It allowed me to take something intangible and make it tangible. I could see it. Knowing that it was real made me feel less crazy. So breaking myself of that was a really long, hard process. And I wouldn't say I'm even fully broken of it. It still comes about sometimes. So I got this job at a record label, labeling or licensing music videos. It was very boring, but I started sneaking my camera into concerts at night. And photographing concerts is really hard. So there are rules. The rules are you get 3 songs, no flash. People are moving, lights are changing. You have to develop a kind of intuition. The camera has to be an extension of you, essentially. The frame after this of Jay-Z, he's waving at me as the bodyguard's like pushing me out of the photo pit. But I was like, no. Eventually my work was good enough that I started working on assignment. I was then photographing and interviewing some of my heroes. You know, these people I've just looked up to for so much of my life. And I loved it. I loved this work, but I felt like I wasn't making the contribution I always hoped I would. I wanted to do work around suicide since Brian died. I knew that immediately. So I studied suicide as an undergrad. I volunteered at a crisis center. I got trained in assist. I wanted to be a clinician and a researcher, but all that got sidetracked by life. So this was happening. And at this point, I started to make the move to professional photo work, shooting a lot of weddings. But I wanted to start a portrait project that was more personal to me. So I went back to suicide. I thought about my experience with my suicide attempt and the years I'd spent suicidal, hurting myself, feeling scared and alone and crazy. And I wondered why I didn't know anybody else with these experiences. So I pulled up Google. I had no idea what to type in, what to call myself, how to describe my experience. So I typed suicide survivor and I hit enter. And this is what I found. Every hit for suicide survivor matched one facet of my experience, which was having lost people to suicide that I cared for, but none matched that personal, that direct experience. I found myself represented in anonymous statistics. All I saw were numbers. And they were numbers that, when you think about it, might not even have been accurate, are still not accurate probably, because our reporting isn't accurate, because sometimes cause of death is ambiguous, because sometimes cause of death isn't reported because of shame, because a lot of suicide attempts are never reported at all, because suicide manifests differently for people with different racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds, and we know so little about how it affects those marginalized communities. So we're likely not catching important data, because gender is a spectrum. So that stat that we love to repeat about how women attempt suicide 3 times or 4 times more than men, that's missing people. It's not capturing the people who don't identify on either end of the binary. Because when someone chooses to forego treatment and nutrition at the end of life, is that counted? Is that even suicide? The numbers here are, I think, so much bigger than we know. Eventually, I did find what was called the Lifeline Gallery. It was a series of kind of nameless, disembodied voices telling bits of their stories. What I was not finding was real people to connect to. I have this hunch that suicide is so difficult for us to wrap our minds around, in part because of this lack of humanity in how we present it to the world. We reduce it to something very impersonal when we talk about it a lot of the time. And we're a social species. We're moved when we have a story to connect to. And we didn't have that. So I decided I was going to find other attempt survivors. I was going to ask them to share their stories, and then I was going to make their portraits, and I wanted to breathe some humanity into these experiences. I wanted people to feel empowered to reclaim their stories, to feel proud of them, to put their names and faces to them, and to say, I survived, I am surviving. I call the project Live Through This because it's what we did and it's what we do. It took a long while to find people willing to take a chance on this idea with me. I didn't make the first portrait until about a year later, in 2011. Actually, this Monday, Labor Day, was the 10-year birthday, I guess, of the project, which is a really big achievement for me. So when I sit down with an attempt survivor, my prompt is this: tell me your name, how old you are, what you do, and your story as you see fit to tell it. I'm giving people a neutral platform to say whatever it is that they need or want to say about their experiences, what led up to their attempt, what it feels like to be suicidal, what happened after, how they survive, how they still struggle. They're in control of their narrative the whole time. I want them to share only what feels safe, only what feels important to them. As attempt survivors, we are often put in this position where our autonomy is taken from us, not just attempt survivors, but people with lived experience of suicidal thoughts too. People make decisions for our own good a lot of the time without consulting us. This can lead to trauma and trauma and trauma. So when someone is sitting with me, I want them to always feel that the power is in their hands. They can stop whenever they want. They don't have to share things they don't want, etc. I listen and I hold space because many of them are telling their stories for the first time. And usually I'm a stranger. All they know about me before we talk is that I've been there. I'm not going to judge. There was Jess, by the way. For so many of us, being able to talk about it at all is, let alone safely, being able to talk about it safely to someone who wants to listen is new. There's no need to feel shame, no need to fear judgment or worry about having the cops called. No being told to set it down, let it go, buck up, get over it. No claims of selfishness or laziness. No recounting of all there is to live for. Just the telling and the listening. It's just a story. I added in so many more portraits than I actually have time for in this section of my talk, but I really wanted you to see kind of just all the different people who have been involved in this over the past 10 years. Well-placed pin. So I want to take you into the interview room with me, and hopefully this video works. I had a little trouble with it last night, but that had never happened before, so we're gonna hope for the best. Here's a little bit of an interview.
For me, I am
Okay, I don't know if it's gonna happen. I'm suddenly having
traditionally usually a pessimist.
Yeah, no. This video is beautiful. It's gonna go in the chat.
Yeah, I do have it in the chat. Do you want me to try it really quick, or do you want me to just leave it in the chat?
Just leave it in the chat. Doing YouTube is just difficult for no reason, but please go watch this video. It is incredible. She's just, her name is Lagamas, but she goes by Vanessa, and she's just such an amazing storyteller. It's a 3.5-minute video, so it's pretty short. So I'm sad that didn't work. We usually talk for about an hour. When the survivor's done telling their story, I might ask some clarifying questions, whether they have thoughts on a specific topic. It's pretty unstructured and like I said, driven by them. And then I make a portrait. I take them somewhere outdoors. I ask them to look into the lens. I don't direct them beyond that really, except for maybe move your chin up. What you see in that portrait is what they were feeling on a single day in their life. I think of it kind of as a time capsule. And it prompts the viewer to do something that we haven't done in the past. And that's to make eye contact, to really look at suicide, to look at the thing that we look away from, to look at the people who have experienced suicidal thoughts, to the people who lived, to the people who have lost someone. And I take them outside for a reason too. This is Nicole. Hers is the first portrait I ever made for the project. I originally set out to make these glossy studio lit portraits. I had them on black backgrounds, and I realized as I was editing this portrait, which is still, I love it so much, and she's also one of my really good friends. I realized putting people who tried to die and woke up alive on a black background might not be the best idea. My goal is not to shock people. We have plenty of that. I am not trying to bring more sensationalistic, moody narratives of the darkness of suicide into the world. This work is about life. How waking up and choosing to stay and struggling through is a triumph. So from that day on, you know, everyone, I took everyone outside, well, almost everyone, in natural light, in, you know, the world we try to take ourselves out of. Usually when you look at the website, people don't know that, but that's a secret. That's what that's about. So y'all know. I don't screen people for the project. If they're willing to show up, I am too. I'm not looking for the best stories or, you know, I don't know, whatever people think of. I'm just, if you're here, I'm here, and we're gonna do this. The only rules I have in place are they have to be 18. They have to be willing to use their full name and their portrait. They have to be at least a year out from their most recent attempt. I think that's important to just give some space to breathe. And they have to be okay with it all going on the website, because the project's home is online. When you type in livethroughthis.org, this is what you're gonna see. There are so few resources out there for us that I wanted to create something that anybody could access at any time. Accessibility is really important. So when you go to the website, you're presented with this grid of all of these faces, of all of these people who are connected by their experiences with suicide, and, you know, obviously sitting in a room with me. It's the only project in existence where these stories are displayed, you know, so many of the stories, but also in such depth. A lot of the transcripts, a lot of the stories are 20, 30 pages long. They're very long, most of them. And not a single one is anonymous. So back to me. In 2012, after being one of the first gay people in New York City to get married, I also got to enjoy the distinction of being one of the first gay people in New York to get divorced. It's funny now, but it, you know, it's a divorce. It made me suicidal. It was a really awful time in my life. And then I was suicidal again a year later when Cosmo was like, hey, do you want to write about this? And I was like, yes, that's a big paycheck. But all that writing meant reliving, and I re-traumatized myself. My girlfriend, now my wife, Fel, encouraged me to find help, and she came with me to get that help when I sought out a new therapist, which no one had ever done for me before. I was diagnosed with anxiety, and I decided to try meds again. Same year, I put together this Kickstarter campaign. Prior to that, the project was very small. I think I had made about 10 portraits. I wanted to take it out of New York, travel the country, meet as many different kinds of people as I could, really try and see, what do we look like? In 30 days, I raised $23,000. 600 people got behind this idea. And I am still surprised by that. I really always thought that this would just be some little thing that I did that would live on a corner of the internet, and maybe one or two people would come across it, and that would be enough. So it's been really overwhelming. It's still the case that the project runs on funds from supporters. It's not saying a ton, but I can mostly keep the site running with, you know, monthly donations, t-shirt sales or pin sales. In 2015, Phil and I got married. You saw some of those pictures already. We went on this epic honeymoon. I won an award from my work. Phil got offered a job as a professor in Philly, and we had 3 weeks to leave New York City. Also, we got a puppy. I don't usually believe in pure breeds, but I'm obsessed with Bernese Mountain Dogs, so please don't judge me. My other dog, Canelita, who I put here so that she wouldn't feel forgotten, is a rescue. Yeah, Dolly came home with us. Her name's Dolly Pardon. That's her full name. But that year, my grandfather had a health scare, and that sent my family into a scramble. And there was nothing I could do to fix any of it. And I found myself back in that same familiar place, suicidal and hurting myself. And in a lot of ways, I fix things as much as I can for my family. So that was really hard. If you've seen the S Word, there's a scene where I'm in my backyard talking about how I just tried to hurt myself, and I lied to Phil about it. And it was during that time. That is one of the hardest scenes for me to watch in that movie. I found out then also that my therapist didn't believe my bipolar diagnosis was right. And I was just anxious and depressive. So all of these terrible things that I had internalized about this label that I'd been given a decade before were just supposed to disappear. I think people don't realize how those labels can identify and how you can identify with them and how harmful that can be. 2 years later, we started planning for the babies. We planned for the distinct possibility that I might get PPD. What we didn't plan for somehow was the depression that I actually experienced during pregnancy. I was so sick and I was in so much pain the whole 9 months, and I had put my body through so much to get pregnant. I had 4 inseminations, 5 IVF cycles. I had a miscarriage a week and a half after our son was born. It was a disaster. And the depression hit about 4 months in. I just felt trapped. I felt trapped in my body. And I started to have suicidal thoughts again. And these were the worst suicidal thoughts I had ever had because I couldn't get out. I was stuck. I was stuck in this body. It's not an option when you're growing a human. And I never did, or for me, and I never did get postpartum depression. So yeah, I share all of this to say, you know, suicidal thoughts are really a part of my life. And I'm showing you all of the ways they've manifested for me, sometimes linked to the diagnosis that someone picked out in a book, and sometimes not at all. As it turns out, one of the things that's been behind almost all of my suicidality, I think, is the mental health system. And that is sad. And it's hard studying to be a clinician too, to know that. Another piece fell into place recently, ADD. Things I've struggled with my whole life, this inability to focus, inability to organize my thoughts, my things, forgetting to eat because I get overwhelmed, extreme emotions, bad self-esteem. I'm taking a DSM class this semester and I happen upon this passage. ADD is often misdiagnosed as bipolar 2. What? 15 years of my life. To say that I'm furious at this would be an absolute understatement. I tried to rewrite this section of the talk many times and spent too much time on it. I'm too angry to sum it up, but that's really hard to know. So what I'm going through is mirroring what so many of the people involved in the project are going through, but the only story I can tell is my own. The rest are on the website. Now, I hate breaking my work down into numbers, as we've discussed. This seems to help some people. So far, I have interviewed 189 attempt survivors in 36 cities from Florida to Alaska, in between. The age range 19 to 69. Lots of faith. About 8% of the people I've interviewed identify as non-binary or trans. About a quarter of the people identify as queer, have some queer identity. 24% identify as people of color. I don't actually collect demographics, so I do want to point that out. This is, you know, based off of what's reported, what's observable, what people have told me since I've met them. I I stay in contact with most of these people. About 17.5% of them are also identify as lost survivors. So there's a lot of crossover between these identities that I think we forget. Major themes that have come out for me. So the interview is unstructured, but I do ask 2 questions of everyone during interviews. What I noticed when I was doing my research before I started the project was that of the few stories available, they all followed a formula. Terrible things happened. There was a suicide attempt. They got help, met some therapy, and then everything was wonderful forever. I think Jess touched on this yesterday too. That was not true to my experience, and I had a hunch that that might also be the case for others. So the first question I ask everyone is suicide still an option for you? The answer most people have for that question is, yes, it's an option, but I don't want it to be. And then they explain what that means to them. You know, sometimes that means I can't predict the future, or sometimes that means I still have suicidal thoughts and I'm working through it. I think that's more of an honest picture of the experience. You know, to me, it's more hopeful and real than, you know, a story arc with a happy ending, because that's usually just a middle. But what it shows us is that the support, that the accepted way to approach suicidal people, that one way, like it's not right. Like we should have more of a long-term focus on helping suicidal people. I'm gonna skip through this, but it's a nice quote about how suicidality exists on a continuum. I think it speaks to how these thoughts can persist over time, and the quality changes. So the other question that I ask people is, what good things have come from your experiences with suicide? You know, we only talk about the negative aspects of suicide, and I wanted to know more about, you know, what happens on the other side. What meaning are we making out of these experiences? And the answer is almost universal. My experiences with suicide allow me to better understand and help other people who have been through the same thing. I love that. I think it's very important. And I think it clues us into something that we have been ignoring, which is the fact that, again, no one knows a survivor's struggles better than another survivor. And peer support is integral. The impact the project has had. I wanted to see who was using the site and how. So with Jess's help and some other people, I collected some data in 2018 via a pop-up survey on the site. We had about 600 people participate. The number of people with lived experience was striking. 84% of people had suicidal thoughts, and almost half were attempt survivors. People said they felt deeply connected to the stories and found hope and solidarity in collective experience. People also visited the site who had, I'm so sorry about my Facebook. People also visited the site who had loved ones who were impacted, and a quarter of them identified as lost survivors. So suicide continues to, I think devastate is a good word. Suicide devastates us, it devastates our society. People with lived experience of suicidality need to be at every table related to suicidology and suicide prevention. We are what has been missing, and we are very important. I'm just going to keep hammering away at that one. So what does that look like, being at the table? Let's use Live Through This as an example. I have worked with suicidologists on crafting safe reporting guidelines for suicide, which now I don't love, but I have been there. I know all about them. I've consulted on apps that use AI to train providers on how to work with us. I have consulted on character development for the Broadway play Dear Evan Hansen. Done a lot of press. That's one of the more surreal moments that I've ever experienced in my life. Much different from the time I saw Anderson Cooper walking down the street and yelled "Silver Fox" over and over again. I'm a terrible person. I produce and co-host this video podcast with Jess called Suicide and Stuff. As you can tell by the graphics, it's pretty irreverent, informal, playful. This was my brainchild, all of these graphics. I really feel very strongly about them. I love them very much. We're looking at suicide through a critical suicidology lens on the podcast. We're also talking about our lives, laughing, you know, making jokes. We've covered all sorts of things. The supernatural, anti-fatness and suicide, incarceration, lots of research, how problematic Suicide Prevention Month can be. This is being used as a tool. Therapists are sharing it with their clients. People are sharing it with other people. I regularly collaborate with researchers. We've used the narratives to ask questions about PTSD, experiences with healthcare, and how it can be better for us. Intersecting identities. I think it's important that we are involved in this research so that we can guide the questions and course correct if necessary. I also help researchers recruit often. A big piece for me is that Live Through This is being taught to crisis workers and clinicians. You're not going to be able to see all of this text, so there's a download link. I think most people don't know that clinicians don't tend to receive mandatory suicide training, anything about suicide, really. It's shocking that one of our main messages is to seek help, and then that the people who are meant to receive us don't have the training, and also there aren't enough of them, and mostly they're all white too. They're unprepared for us, so it's really fulfilling to see this changing, that aspect of things. So I wrote this issue brief for a policy class about the need for coursework. If you want to take a look at it, again, the link is there. The CDC, this is something so many people are ignoring, and I think it's incredibly important to us. CDC came out with this report in 2018 that showed that 54% of Americans who died by suicide in a 17-year period did not have a known mental health history. This points to the complexity of the problem. There's an intersection, of course, but look at all these other issues that are at play. These are just regular old life things: relationship problems, crises, physical health, legal, houselessness, losing jobs, substance use, problematic substance use, life things. And we are ignoring this. So yeah, this is the thing that has fueled me for the past couple of years specifically. We have to think differently about suicide. As it stands, suicidology and suicide prevention, we have a PR problem. We're in conflict with ourselves all the time, which makes it very difficult for us to land on a shared goal. It makes it difficult to get people on board who haven't already been affected by suicide, I think. We'll tell you that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the US. It's the 2nd leading cause of death for young people. A statement like this might lead a casual observer to think that this is an important thing that we should pay attention to. Then we will push you away, and we'll tell you that suicide is a rare event. We'll tell you that it's abnormal. We'll tell you it's linked to depression and mental illness, and obviously no one wants to be connected to those things. And then we'll show you pictures like this. These pictures are probably why so many people say they had no idea that someone they knew was suicidal. Because this is what we think of when we think about suicide. We're not thinking about all of the beautiful people that I just showed you, all of the people who we haven't met yet who've had these experiences, all the people who are not ready to share these experiences. This is what we're thinking of. We'll tell you that it's a complex phenomenon, and then we'll follow that up with talk of assessments, screenings, risk factors, evidence-based practices that are all normed on white people that totally ignore the realities of the world that we live in right now. If suicide is complex, then there have to be many ways of knowing about it. There have to be many responses to it. Our body of knowledge around suicide is not as established as we would have people believe. The research is not as rigorous as it should be. It's not historically been influenced by or inclusive of people with lived experience. Of course, we want answers we can rely on. I understand the desire for this to be real, but we don't have that yet. So my challenge today is that we broaden our views on suicide. I want us to remember the path that we're on now is not the only one. And question, how does the view change when we start asking questions and making links? How does the view change when we start asking about ableism, colonization, white supremacy, structural oppression, forced treatment, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia? How do these things impact suicide? How does the view change when we acknowledge that suicide and mental illness is political that it carries a long history of abuses, when we start linking it to Nazi experiments, when we start talking about forced sterilization, when we start talking about mental illness and suicide in the carceral system, when we start talking about the ethics of pulling people out of their environments, handcuffing them, and taking them to hospitals against their will, how does the view change? Suicide does not happen in a vacuum. We've got to stop locating this within a person as a disorder. We have to look around. This is actually a perfect moment in history for that. The current climate, politically, pandemically, is a great example. You know, how are we being affected in this moment, and how is that affecting suicide? We've got to take people's unique histories, their cultures, their belief systems, every single thing about them into account before we decide how best to offer support. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. So there's that rant. I knew that someday we would lose somebody in the Live Through This family. It's just a reality of this work and of our lives as attempt survivors. You know, we're all at higher risk. And I knew that the more people I spoke to and met, the higher the statistical likelihood became of losing someone. Natalie Medina was the first. I interviewed Natalie in Eugene, Oregon in 2014, and we had this immediate connection. And I loved her so much, and she became a really vocal advocate. We lost her in June of 2016. I'd thought prior to that Tuesday morning that when the day came that we lost someone, I would have to stop doing this, that I wouldn't be able to do it anymore. But Natalie made sure that I knew in her own way that these stories needed to be shared. So the opposite happened. After her death, I felt more resolve than ever to keep doing this work, to make sure that our voices are heard. And Bob was next. We lost Bob in 2018. And a few months later, we lost Heidi. Heidi was local to me in Philadelphia. And I had just seen her a couple months before at a conference, doing the things she did best. We lost Stella last summer around this time. It's very hard for me to get through this part of the talk. Stella's son, Christopher, died by suicide in 2010. She called him her bright, shiny penny. And her other son, John, is also an attempt survivor, and he was in the portraits that I went through earlier. Every one of these people that I just showed you survived great trauma, and they did everything they were supposed to do. And it was still too hard. This world was still too harsh. The pain was still too great. Every day they woke up and stayed was a big day. I think it was an important day. And the fact that we lost them does not point to a failure in them or a disorder in them. It points to a failure in this system. When Stella told me her story, she said, "I don't think humans are supposed to have that much struggle. I don't know if it's genetic, if it's nature or nurture, but I've been around long enough to know that enough of us do. And with the exponential increase in the incidence in suicide, especially with our young people in this nation, it abhors me that so little is being done about it." And I think she is right. What we've been doing isn't working, and it's not enough. So I've got this rapid fire list because this part changes for me all the time. Here are some things we can do. We can be willing to have the conversation, know that every suicidal thought isn't a crisis, that some suicidal thoughts are comforting, that some suicidal thoughts are harm reduction, that sometimes having that one option, the option of suicide, is what helps someone to stay. When hopelessness is their only thing that they're feeling. That's why it's so important to be ready to ask the question of, are you feeling suicidal? And then to listen and to take the time and explore that, and not to run in fear. Every conversation about suicide for me is scary, and I assume that is the case for a lot of people, but I stick with it, and I think we should all do that, especially if we are serving people. Validate the pain, sit with it, hold it, acknowledge that this world is not set up for many people to exist, let alone to survive or to thrive. Whether you're supporting someone in crisis as a family member or a friend, or you're serving them as a care worker, always remember that their agency should be your primary focus. How do you help them through a crisis while allowing them to stay in control of their mind and their body? How do you help them through a crisis while maintaining their definition of safety, not your definition of safety? There was a slide on this earlier. Reserve 911 for the absolute last resort. Please check out that link in that slide. Put lived experience at the forefront whenever and wherever you can. Partner with us, collaborate with us. Legitimize peer support as valuable and valid, and pay people well for that expertise. Legitimize being a clinician or an academic with lived experience. Legitimize being open about that lived experience, because there is a lot of gross, harmful prejudice happening in this field, and it is hurting us all. Let us tell our stories, and let us tell them how we want to. Don't force us into the good survivor narrative. Let others see people like us, and let us see each other struggle, rise, struggle, fall, rise. Let us redefine hope, because what we see out there is not hope, I don't think. It's sugar. Let us redefine it. Let us redefine it through the knowledge that suicidal thoughts and actions are valid and real, and it's not selfish or weak to feel these things. And it might happen again and again, but if we have the right supports, we probably can live through it. God, learn about mental health and involuntary commitment laws. I'm doing this right now. I waited too long, and it is infuriating. Learn about how these things affect people's civil liberties, their Second Amendment rights. Learn about how you can advocate for someone who's been involuntarily committed and has few supports. Understand that all of this affects Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color, queer people differently than it would somebody who presents as straight and white. Think critically about the messaging that we hear from suicide prevention and demand better. Fight for funding, policy change, demand better research. Validate, accept, appreciate, and celebrate the Black, Brown, Indigenous, Latinx, and other people of color in your life. Validate, accept, appreciate, and celebrate the fat and disabled people in your life. Believe victims. Donate to people with lived experience. Are they doing work you love? Support it. Are they struggling with bills? Pay one. Do you have extra money? Help someone. Do you know any trans people? Use their names, the names they want you to use. Use their pronouns, the ones they want you to use. Donate to their legal name change or gender marker change funds. Donate to their surgery funds. Throw them parties. Celebrate them and love them. Do you know someone in the middle of a breakup? Support them. Even if you're so tired of hearing it, support them. Grab them dinner, drop it off. We lose so many people to relationship issues. Just support them. Be a safe adult for our kids. You know, I mentioned earlier that I didn't have many safe adults when I was a teenager, that the people who I thought were safe threatened to kill me. Kids deserve our love and our care and our guidance, even if they're not our own kids. Use whatever skills you have to make someone's life better every day that you possibly can. Suicide prevention is all of these things. It is both subtle and explicit. Suicide prevention is having food, it's having housing, a living wage, healthcare. It's supporting people who need help, sliding scale therapy fees, accessibility to your practice if you are a clinician, legal fees, bail, abolish bail. It's acknowledging structural oppression, white supremacy, and it is actually doing something about changing that. Suicide prevention is fighting for disability rights, civil rights, reproductive rights, voting rights. It is literally taking care of one another. It's community, it's collective care, it's mutual support. We need to remember that we are all supposed to be here for each other, to take care of each other. When you're improving a person's quality of life, you are practicing suicide prevention. And it's up to us, so let's get to work. Thank you.
It does. I want you to keep going. Like, this is so good. Thank you.
I mean, I'm sure I could keep yelling about things.
No, I just
questions.
Yes, time for questions. There's a lot in the chat, and so I will try to speak up some of it. So a lot of it's from me too, so I'm sorry. But thank you.
Take this. Well, I guess I should leave this up for a while, right? Find me on the internet, tweet at me, email me. If I don't respond to your email, nudge me. That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I'm scrolling the chat. If there's anyone who's on the phone and you need to *6 to unmute, you can do that to ask a question, or you could also unmute on your computer to ask one, and then I'll jump in with something from the chat when I get to the top.
I have a question for you. I work as a clinician for Rogers Behavioral Health, a big psychiatric hospital. It's now nationwide. You talk a lot about, I guess I can turn my video on. I'm still not dressed for the day. I just got my 2 little ones out the door. I'm just wondering, you talk a lot about like waiting to call 911 as like a last resort. How do you balance that and also some of the like, just like need to plan for safety? Like how do you balance that, and how do you evaluate that? Because, you know, as a clinician, you're taught if someone has a plan, you know, is suicidal with a plan intent, that's enough for them, that they should be hospitalized. So how do you, you know, just any, I guess, insight you have on how do you balance like reserving those safety measures for the last chance when you know, when they're.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of my work up to recently has been kind of larger picture, and now I'm really getting into the nitty gritty of paperwork and documentation and organizational needs and policy. I think we need to consider where our loyalties are. Is our loyalty to our work, our job, or is it to the people we're serving? I know that's a privilege to be able to say that, but I think a lot of us who do this work do have that, because most of us are white women. Are we here to serve the suicidal people, the suicidal person in front of us, or are we here for the other stuff? Who gets to define safety? I think that's a very easy question. You know, if you have somebody in front of you, if they have a history of suicidality, and they tell you that, or I mean, you could even ask, say, have you been to this place? If you have, what has happened? Have you had any bad experiences? How can we plan in advance for what might happen if you do come in here in crisis? I mean, if they're walking into a therapy session or something, they're usually, I think Jess said this yesterday, they're usually not going to be holding their means. That does happen sometimes, but so if they're with you, they're usually safe. And you ask them, how do we keep you safe? What can we do to get you through this? How can I support you? How can the people in your life support you? Our fear drives too much of what we're doing. You know, I think we need to remember that we're here to support people. And we're not here to save them. I know we like to talk about that in suicide prevention, but we're here to help achieve a better quality of life for people who are struggling. So how do we do that? Can we stop thinking about the liability piece? Can we get past our fear? This is all hard. Like I know that it's hard to put into practice. But it's thinking about those things and trying to work through it in advance with the person if you can, and telling them, you know, I'm a mandated reporter. At some point, I am going to have to take actions that I don't want to take, and that you probably don't want me to take. So how can we try and avoid that while also remaining honest with each other? I think that communication and that clarity and that intention are really huge. And I think that when we frame it that way, we're likely to have more trust, hopefully, you know, if someone hasn't been too damaged by this, and that we can get people through crises in a better way. But also that piece where it's like, not every suicidal thought is a crisis. I think so many people don't know that. And it goes back to the training piece. The moment people hear suicide, they're like, oh, gotta hand this person off, can't do it. And that's not fair to us. Like, I think as clinicians, as care workers, it's our, obviously you guys are here, but it's our, ethically, we have to get this training. So I don't know, that's a lot of stuff, but that's what I got for now. Thank you for asking.
So there was a chat from Gina when you were talking about the hospital experience, and I just lost it, but I think it was about how do we make that experience better when folks are hospitalized and going through systems of care, especially hospitals. What can we do to make that better?
You want my real answer?
Yeah.
Burn them down. Just burn them all down. How do you make them better? You know,
Trying to find how it was worded too.
I mean, I you know, if people are there, how do we make them feel safe? I think that a lot of how to make someone feel safe has to do with the people who are there caring for them. So probably paying people in those hospitals a living wage, not just a living wage, a nice wage. Paying everyone a nice wage, you know, just paying people would be great. Paying them, having people in those places who have compassion and who have understanding and who have experienced suicidal people when they weren't in crisis and understand that we're people too. Asking the hard questions like these. What are your ethics? Where are your boundaries? When is it okay to subdue a person physically? When is it okay to subdue a person chemically? Is it okay? I don't think so. Comfort objects. I remember when one of my family members was hospitalized, his shoes were taken from him. He does not like being barefoot. And, you know, I know shoelaces, blah, blah, blah. But we have things that help us feel safe. And if the purpose of being in a hospital is safety, then we have to consider how a person defines their safety and really do our best to work toward helping them feel safe. You know, there are all kinds of things, but I think really remembering that the people in those locked units, all of them on all sides, are people, and they deserve better than what they're getting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we definitely need to think about that in terms of like zero suicide trainings too, and how we're training healthcare systems to respond to people who are suicidal when you are in the system. Thank you. Yeah. Jean says, tell me more about how Suicide Prevention Month can be challenging. Do you mean that it can be re-traumatizing?
My main issue with Suicide Prevention Month, as we're here during Suicide Prevention Month, my main issue is with the messaging. I mean, I have lots of issues with it, but every year it's the same thing. Messages of help and hope, and the people defining help and hope are usually not people with lived experience. Be the one to. Jess talked about this yesterday, and I mentioned it a little bit. Collective care. You can't be the only one. We have to take care of each other. You shouldn't constantly be monitoring people. There has to be, you have to set yourself up so that you are safe for someone to talk to. It's just, everything about it feels so fake, and it's regurgitated every single year. And then on the other side of it, the people who are doing this work, we're exhausted. By September 30th, we're like, is it Christmas yet? Like, I need these 2 or 3 months to take time off because I need to breathe and I need space. And I'm so frustrated and sad that this is where we are with things. So God, I would just love more honesty. I would love, again, you know, more people with lived experience. To write Love on Her Arms, if we're being honest, is not my favorite organization. They have a campaign running right now. I think it's called Worth Living For, the hashtag is, and I think it's pretty trite, but they brought in a photographer named Andre, and he made this beautiful portrait series, and you never see that. I have shivers thinking about his pictures because they're so beautiful, and I almost think like, God, if we could have not pushed the positivity piece, like how much more powerful this could have been. So like, positivity is valuable to some people, but so is honesty. How do we balance that? You know, I I know it re-traumatizes some people, and that there's also something to be said for that. But I think maybe if it didn't feel so inauthentic, maybe that re-traumatizing piece wouldn't be as big as it might be for some.
Yeah. There's more in the chat, but I'm going to pause for a second if someone wanted to speak up with a question.
I'm not checking the thread, the thread right now, the chat. Yeah. I'll check it once we're done.
Yeah, I'm checking. I'm just starting at the top to make sure I'm not missing big ones.
Okay. So Janine Hoff's here. Hello. You're my people.
Hello.
Oh, no.
No, go ahead.
I was just, for me, this does have a parallel to like developmental disabilities, because I've studied a lot of like deinstitutionalization, and in Wisconsin we had Chippewa Falls, where there's like a place they used to just call it the island, and people would just go there and they would have to live there from, you know, birth to death. And so I guess I see that pattern a lot across a lot of different, really any difference. Like you can like put a person in place and that was like the norm. And it still kind of is. I mean, we're still trying to put people into a spot. And it's tough working in the field because then when it's your day, when someone shows up and they are like, yes, I have a weapon. Yes, I'm going to do this after I leave. No, I don't want you to call my parents. And it's like, I don't know what's left for me at that point. Like, really only had one person that I've had to like say, yeah, we need to go to the ER. And when they got to the ER, they said all the same stuff. And then they did have to go to the hospital. And it didn't help. It didn't improve the situation. But it's like, what are the other options at that point if the parents aren't even able to keep them safe? Like not able to be safe. Like
I don't think there are good answers here. Like I feel all of this. I don't think there's one perfect answer.
I'm not trying to hold you responsible for it either.
Oh no.
I go through the same thing where I'm like, well, you know, I've been there, you know, I've lost a family member, like, so it's kind of both, you know. It's like I wouldn't want to be sent to a hospital either. And there were people in my life that were able to support me at the time. But like when you meet someone who doesn't have that, I just feel like the options are so small, or like, sorry.
Yeah. One great thing that we don't have enough of is respite houses. Like what could it be like if people who are, you know, having a hard time just go somewhere and chill out and not be in a locked unit, and maybe be with somebody who got it, who could support them, who could hang out with them. You know, but that's not enough. It's not hands-on enough.
I mean, that is what I do for my neighbors. Like I have a bunch of neighbor kids who I can come over, but like when I'm at work, I'm not neighbor me anymore. Now I'm work me. I got to do work stuff. I don't know. But I do agree with you. I've seen that work one time with foster care, where they did foster care with a nice family, and that was able to like bring their, like they were able to reunify. That did work out. Now that you're seeing that, like respite, foster care as a respite has worked before.
Yeah. I think if we were focused less on prediction and kind of force, then there might be more options for us. You know, the fact that you said it's only happened for one person with you, I think that's a big deal. And I think that probably speaks to how amazing you are. I have a neighbor who's a social worker and a clinician, and she has ways. She will not hospitalize people. She makes herself available to people. So it's possible, but we might have to push the boundaries of what we're taught. And I think a lot of suicide work kind of requires that of us. I think we have to be pushing back a lot. I don't know if I have a great response.
Yeah. One thing people were resonating with in the chat was the increased training. So both like promoting suicide care trainings for providers and making those available, and encouraging providers to get that continuing education in suicide specific trainings. And then also including it in graduate school. There's a lot of people who were like, I never learned about suicide, and I never did in my MSW program either. And so obviously those are some policy issues and we can push for that, but I didn't know if you had more to say about that or suggestions on how we get more trainings out and encourage it.
I have so many feelings about this. If you know somebody connected to an MSW program, offer your services. I mean, we shouldn't be working for free, but I walked into my MSW program and I said, all the things I know are about suicide, please use me. And now Live Through This is in my clinical foundation course. It's required reading.
Wow.
What else? I've gotten some readings from the critical suicidology text into my course, to really kind of get a balanced knowledge of here's what we're taught and here's maybe how we question it. So, bring that up with the local university or the MSW program that you're connected to. It's important. If there is anything important in working as a clinician, it's suicide. It's life or death. We should know about this before almost anything else. And we should have more trainings, but also the trainings are so boring.
It's true.
Oh my God. How are we changing that? And then it doesn't help when people feel like they have to do it. How do we compel people to want to do this, to want to show up, to not have to feel like every 15 minutes they have to put their name in a chat? Like, why is there busy work? This should be the work, the hard emotional stuff, the questions, talking to people with lived experience, listening to our stories, talking about the hard stuff that we have to do as clinicians, and where our ethics are and where our loyalties lie. Like, all the questions I've been asking, all that stuff needs to be in trainings. They shouldn't just be the same old boring QPR slide again and again. And also, all of the trainings that we have rely on that last piece, that refer piece. What about when 9 to 5 is over? What about when we're just in life? What are the differences in our responsibilities there? How are we as a community of all people taking care of each other? What happens if you can't refer? What happens if a person doesn't have access? All of these things. I think trainings need to change. They need to be thrown out the window. There are some that are very expensive. I think that's a problem. There are also not enough of them. The ones that exist aren't developed with people with lived experience. Neither are the evidence-based practices that we use. Start over.
I think, and Barbara had texted me something to add to the chat. I don't know if I got this in exactly, but like, how do we, essentially like replace QPR? If like Wisconsin has decided QPR is like the thing, like how do we bring something better?
Can I comment too?
Sure.
I know I've been frustrated because my chats, I can't type for some reason. But this is like, I'm jumping up and down. This has been amazing, Des. I mean, oh my gosh. And I so appreciate hearing your story. I really do. And, I sort of, people know this about me, I've been coming sort of full circle. I've been TPR trainer for 8 years and a master trainer. And it's getting harder and harder and harder for me to go through it and get it out. And I know the reason. It's because, and even though I try to put my heart in there, my heart's not in there. My love is not in that training anymore. And, I think that part of it is that and I said this yesterday, we don't know how to sit with other people's pain. We don't know how to do it. We're pain phobic. We start resonating with that pain. It's like, oh no, I'm in pain, and we have to fix it. And we want to move on. We want to get out of there. And I think that's a part of it. And so as we've been sitting here, I've been thinking, well, maybe we don't have QPR, but we weave some of the good information that's in QPR. Some of it's good. But we get rid of the slides and we sit down and we have group circles and we have conversations. Maybe we call it conversations about suicide. I don't know, but But I think that it has to be more heartful, and we have to be able to model what are some resources that we can sit with this awful pain when we hear about trauma, when we hear about an attempt, when we hear that your kid is suicidal. You know, we don't just knee jerk and want to put them in the hospital. We stay there, we hang in there with it, you know. And so I think that's, for me, that's a big part of it. And I'm someone who has seen many psychiatrists, therapists, have been on meds for 30 years straight, have lifelong depression, have not had one psychiatrist ever ask me if I was suicidal, which I was, and I damn sure wasn't going to tell them.
Yeah.
The training has got to change. I'm an MD. The training has got to change.
Yeah. So interesting, you know, you said I probably come off as this extremist. I do understand, you know, I'm pretty open to both sides of an argument. I think there is a lot of value in QPR in parts of it. I've also heard, and I'm not 100% on this, but I've heard that you can change those slides, that you can alter things and put
Okay,
your
don't
heart
turn
in
me
them.
in, but I do it all the time. I do the training, I do the master trainings. I'll probably get fired after this, but I don't care. I do the master trainings, but I change my slides all the time. I have slides and they're about hope. I have quotes from Stacey Friedenthal, you know.
I love her.
Tell me about the story of how you came to think about suicide. Whenever I talk to clinicians, I put that slide in there.
Yeah.
I'm always changing it. You know, I put movies in there, you know, I don't get approval. So I don't know what to say. I have sort of done that. But even
What happens if you don't get approval?
Nothing other than somebody could tell you and you could not be doing official QPR, but who cares, you know? I mean, I guess I'm at that point with it, you know, and I do. And so I don't know what to say, but I think that when we train in those core slides, and they haven't changed for as long as I've been in it, they need to change, they need to look different. And I put pictures in and all that, but still, you know, I think when you're in a time crunch and you have 1 hour and you've got to get through some of that, you need more time to have some of this dialogue back and forth. So asking people, well, what do you think? If you know, your dad told you they were thinking of suicide, what would you say? You know, we do the role plays, but they're always time crunch. I think there's got to be more emphasis on the conversation about having what you're doing, these real conversations where we really get at it and we really talk about, yeah, this is life and this is how it is, and it's messy, and it's not always going to work out the way you want it to work out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that letting go of control piece is really big, and it's really hard.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. It is 10:19, so there are still a million comments that I want to read, but I want us to transition to the lived experience panel so that we have time for these awesome folks to share about themselves.
This is Abby, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I was just trying to type really fast and really speedy, and I went and updated our QPR slides. This is Abby in Greenfield.
Yeah.
I updated our QPR slides. It was super easy to work with the Institute, and they approved it, no problem, and it looks like completely different than the slides that they had. So I'm happy to share that with anybody that's interested too.
Please.
Just let me know and I can share it with you or whoever, and just type to me in a chat where I can share it. I'd be more than happy to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. Yeah, please email those to me. And if other folks are interested, you can email me too or chat me, and I can send those out to QPR
We're working
instructors.
on a youth version too that's quite different, and you can do it, you can work with them, but there are still some basic parameters that generally they want you to follow. Thank you, Abby. I'd love to see your slides.
In like 10 seconds, right?
Oh, absolutely. 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 No, and it gets it out there, and it's a mechanism. I'm not trying to totally knock it, but it's been niggling at me for a while, and I'm not sure I can keep really training people in it unless they change the training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. And with that, everybody who needs continuing education hours, quick chat in the chat, your name and your credentials. Again, that's only for people who need your continuing education hours for your license. Thank you so much, Des. And let's transition to the lived experience panel. All right. I wish there was a way to like control the gallery so you could just like see them. But if folks have it in gallery view, you could see who's talking, or you could change it to speaker mode if you want to look at them like one at a time.
Will you put that gallery link back in, Leah?
Well, this is where we're on the same link for the lived experience panel. Oh. When I said gallery, I meant the view on Zoom. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just stay here.
Yep.
Are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready. We're ready. We're doing it. All right, take it away.
Okay. So it's our lived experience panel with Dylan, Janine, Shay. I was originally going to read bios, but I want these fine humans to be able to introduce themselves. I think Dylan is going to go first because I said so. Dylan, tell us who you are.
Appreciate it. I'm Dylan Sessler. I'm just a normal everyday guy that has built a social media following of about 40,000 people on TikTok by talking about suicide, mental health. I'm a 12-year veteran of the Army National Guard. I'm actually currently serving right now as we speak, doing COVID testing. So I'm taking half day off right now. I've been through, I lost my father to suicide at 6 years old. Had PTSD from that, went through depression, anxiety, PTSD from war, and I almost took my life in 2015. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Des.
Glad you're still here. Let's go next. Janine, is that how you pronounce your name? We didn't get to talk in advance. I can't see you.
Yes, you're muted, Janine.
Yes, that is exactly how you pronounce it.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to make sure. Tell us who you are. Tell us about you.
I am Janine Rivers Colburn. I am a motivator and musician. I consider myself a motivator because it is my mantra to every day show people how to empower confidence so that they feel good about who they are. I am very well known in social media. I have around 10,000 followers combining all the social media. So I try to use that as a platform to keep it real, to encourage, and to just simply make someone's day better.
Shay wanted to go last. I didn't have an order in mind. I was just thinking about Shay wants to go last. So Shay, tell us about you.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I don't like to go first because, anxiety. But my name is Shay. I am 23 today. It's my birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. It's kind of cool that I'm talking about how I don't know. I think it's cool that it landed on my birthday. I work at NAMI Fox Valley as I co-facilitate the young adult support group. And I as well work at Iris Place, the peer respite home, as a peer support companion. And I love doing that, and that's like my favorite thing ever. I am a suicide attempt survivor, and I lost my father to suicide as well. And this is my passion right here, and this is just what I love to do. I love to talk about it and educate and inform. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we have such limited time. I have 3 questions for each of you. Janine, what part of your experience as an attempt survivor, or what you've learned from it, do you want people to walk away remembering or thinking about? You're muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I think back to that time. I was 22 years old when I tried to attempt suicide. And one of the things that I can remember is that I really did not want to die. What I wanted was for the pain to simply stop. So when you are feeling hopeless, when you are feeling lost, when you feel that there's nothing or no reason to live, I want people to know that it's the pain that you are feeling that is just so hard to take, I want them to stop and just really think about that it's the pain, not that they, you know, the pain can make you feel like you want to stop living, but if you stop and think about all the amazing things that you have to live for, you realize that you just want to stop hurting. And how do you exactly do that? So that's what I want. I want a person to remember.
Amazing. Shay, what do you think?
I guess the thing that I've dealt with a lot with experiencing suicidal thoughts or attempts is extreme judgment that comes from you know, your loved ones or your friends about how they think you should have handled it or how they think you should have responded or reached out. I think that people a lot of the times forget that being suicidal is such a different state of mind. You don't know what's right to do. You don't know what's wrong to do. You don't know who to reach out to or who's, you know, on your side. You feel like no one's on your side. And I just think a lot of people are too quick to judge. So I would just want people to take away that, you know, it's a different state of mind and it's not going to be something that makes complete sense, but like, don't judge.
Yeah. Dylan?
Well, I have a lot of conversations with a lot of people. Obviously, with having 40,000 people on TikTok, I talk to a lot of people. I help a lot of people, and I've come to the very same conclusion that Des, I think you've realized as well, is that I think obvious nature of suicide is that suicide is not the problem, it's the result. Suicide is what happens to people when you're judged and you're hurt and you're abused and you're neglected and abandoned to the point of to the point of silence. The problem is that we just are not taught how to express ourselves in a healthy way from the beginning, more or less. The judgment is, you know, I put up a video that literally, I actually pull it up at some point, that literally like explains remaining silent when you're dealing with mental health issues is not healthy. Talk to someone who won't judge you. And the resounding comment that came out from that, there's 868 comments on this video. The one comment that struck me the most that everybody repeated was, finding someone who won't judge you or belittle your feelings isn't easy, right? Like that's the resounding nature of the problem that we're dealing with, is that people almost force the judgment on people that don't know how to deal with it, and there's no openness and honesty allowed within the conversation. So, you know, if you're looking at the nature of suicide, you have two things that are required. You need someone with empathy that will actually listen, but then you also need within yourself, because I've felt this battle, right? You need to have the courage to speak, and that's what I want people to understand, is that it's a two-way road, and honestly, you're not always gonna have that two-way road.
Yeah, thank you. We're gonna do an experiment. You guys know about what it is. Shay, what good has come from your experience with suicide?
All the things that I've learned about the brain, about how people work. I think that through my own recovery or process of recovery, I've just learned so much, and I think that it was almost like meant to happen, because now the line of work that I'm in and passions and everything is a direct result of what I've been through, and I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't be helping the people that I help, or, you know, doing all of the positives if it weren't for that. And I think it's just done so much good, so much more good than harm for me personally.
Yeah. I went on the Glenn Beck show once, and he asked me if I regretted my suicide attempt. And I was like, I mean, I didn't love it. It wasn't a good time, but I would not take it back, because
never
have these amazing things. Yeah.
have so much. Your brain has just opened so much more, and can see things and feel things that other people just can't feel.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah.
Janine, what do you think?
What good has come. I think about at that moment when I tried to attempt suicide. I think about all of the things that I didn't think could be possible, how I was worthless and how nothing great was ever going to happen into my life, because to me, I was just garbage. So what was worth living for? What was there worth living for? So now I'm 56 years old, and I look back to the age of 22, how I felt at that moment. And all of the great things that have happened to me. I have a beautiful daughter who is 33 years old. I had a great experience being a professional vocalist and traveling all around the world. I have written about my experience in a book. I'm a best-selling author. And I think about all of the wonderful people and experiences that I've had through my life. And what my greatest good is being able to be transparent enough and allowing myself to be vulnerable enough to share my story of my attempted suicide so that other people can see that I have been able to live through it and that they can too.
Thank you. Dylan, go.
Well, I mean, I see this fight from so many different perspectives, because I lost my father at such a young age that it really, I still remember walking downstairs and remembering like the feeling of understanding he was never coming back. Like I knew that the day, and to capture that emotion and that understanding of what was happening in front of me, and obviously try and stop him, I learned very early on that you cannot save everyone, right? When you have a son looking at his father, excuse me, right, you're looking at him and you're telling him, don't leave, and he walks away. How can you save that, right? Like you have to understand that not everyone is able to step into that mindset and take the guidance and the trust that they have in you and learn it, right, and step forward. Give me 1 second. So I learned that at 6, and what that taught me, the best thing that came from that is empathy. The most important thing in the world is empathy. And if you can't understand that, I think everyone's brought that image of how to love and understand people from the beginning, but as the world, as the world beats them down, and the tragedies and trials that we have to face, it's beaten out of us. And I think that needs to be put back into schools. I think that needs to be put into trainings like this. I think it needs to be implemented in every aspect of life, and that's what I'm here for. And that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Okay, this is the big question. Janine, is suicide still an option for you?
When I saw this question, it was really hard. People always look at me as this happy-go-lucky person that has it all together. I've had so many people tell me, Janine, you have it all together. I wish you had your life. I wish I had your life. Everything is just perfect for you. I want to be you. And I laugh. Because to answer your question is suicide still an option? Yes, it is. And what I want to tell people is I'm very good at smiling because I want to be that example of happiness for people. I want to motivate people. But I have found the best way to motivate a person is to show them who you really are. And I tell people, but you don't know my struggle. You don't know every day how I still have to deal with those same emotions and feelings that I did when I was 22. There are so many days that when I wake up, I don't want to wake up. I just want to stay in bed all day. Or I say to myself, I'm just so tired of just feeling so yucky. And so yes, suicide is still an option. And when I get too afraid that I'm going to allow it to be an option is when I seek help. And, I was diagnosed in 2003 with bipolar 2 disorder, which means that I have more lows than highs. And so my lows sometimes get to the point that it's really, really hard for me. And if my medication I feel is not working, I pick up the phone and I call someone. And I hope that every day or every time I feel suicide is an option, that I still consider picking up that phone as an option and that I never give up. But I can't promise that I won't. And it's just, that's the reality of my life.
Thank you. Yeah, I identify with that quite a bit. I think, Shay, what do you think?
It is absolutely still an option to me. I've been dealing with suicidal thoughts and that general headspace for a long time, and I think at this point it's become kind of like a coping skill, or a bad one. But when things get rough, I can always remember, well, I can take myself out if I ever want to, or if it ever gets to that point. And I know it's like super dark, but that's just, I can't imagine not having it as an option. Like, I don't know, I can't, if anything in my life, or if everything in my life is not going the way I want it to, or I have no control, at least that would be the one thing that I do have control over. And on top of that, even though I haven't attempted in a while, I still deal with the suicidal thoughts as well. So it's not completely gone. Yeah.
I know that it seems dark. I've heard that from so many people, Shay, that having one option when you feel like you have no other options.
Yeah.
It's maybe not what other people would do, but if it works, then it works.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dylan is going to be our holdout. That's why I saved him for last. So he's going to give us the opposite answer. What do you got, Dylan?
Yep. My answer is no. I have chosen, I think, for the past 5 years, I choose purpose. I choose to occupy my mind. I still have the darkness within me of what I've faced and what I've been through, but suicide is not an option because I've seen it. I've seen it from every single angle you probably can. I've seen it from watching my dad. I've seen it from watching myself. And I see the impact of what it does to people outside of myself. And I think that's right. That's where the empathy comes in. And I've turned that empathy into self-empathy. I understand what I've had to face. I've understood for so long how hard it was, and I never gave it the credence that it needed. And I was able to step outside and look at the world around me, look at who I was and what I had the ability to do. And I help people every day. I step forward and I put myself within the context of listening to people and providing that empathy and showing people by leading the example that suicide does not have to be the option. It's okay to talk about, it's okay to have, but it doesn't have to be the option. You have people that are willing to not judge you. You have people that are willing to sit there and listen to you in your darkness. And here we are, right? All of us right here, that's what we're here for. So my answer is undoubtedly no, and that will never change. I am here for the long run. I am here to offer people the empathy that I have in every capacity that I can. And that's why I do what I do. I have a purpose.
Thank you. We have 10 more minutes left.
We do.
Shocked. I did not plan more questions. But I think Dylan talked about having people. And so I think I'd love to hear from y'all. You know, what do you have? Who do you have? What do you do when it gets bad? When it's go time? What do you have there for you? Janine, tell me.
For me, I have a great wealth of friends that know my story, because I do not allow myself to have any skeletons in the closet. So I always say that my life is truly an open book. So I have my husband, I have really friends that have known me over 10 to 15 years. Some people were there through the dark time of my attempt. So I have them, I have my husband. And I think most of all, it's my faith in God. I'm a very, I strongly believe in my faith in God. And I know that it's that faith that I have through my Creator in those dark moments, just allowing His Holy Spirit to just reign over me and just know that I'm going to be okay. So friends, God, and lots of love from lots of people, a lot of support, and support groups.
Dylan.
Well, that's a great question. I think something came out of me a long time ago. I was talking to a client of mine. You are the only person that will be there 100% of your life. I preach that to my core, is that if you can find within yourself a way to overcome the past and overcome what you've been through and where you've been, you can search outside of yourself all you want, but you need to be happy with what you've been through, right? You need to. There's a really good book. If you don't know much about PTSD, I really recommend you go read Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. I can put that in the chat when I'm done talking. It's reimagining your story. It's showing yourself, right? Like, I see my father and what he did as the most important thing in my life. It's the best thing that ever happened to me because I help people. And if you're not willing to go back and search through that darkness and sift through all of the pain and the struggle and suffering that you've been through, then how are you ever supposed to be there for yourself? You are always going to treat yourself like you are, you know, like Janine was talking, like trash, right? You are not trash. You have been through stuff that could not have ever been imagined for you. And it just happened, right? Like, shit happens, excuse my language, but I'm an infantryman. That's kind of what comes out of me sometimes. Like, I've been to war. I've seen the worst that humanity can have to offer me, but it has all given me a purpose. It has all given me the ability to see I can help veterans. I help literally women that have been through sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape. Like, you know, I've talked to guys who've killed people, who haven't killed people, but have lost friends in action. Like, I've seen so many different stories connect themselves to what we're talking about, suicide. It's the result, right? We're not talking about the problem. We're not communicating about what has actually happened in their lives. We're talking about this result like it's the only thing that we can talk about. We need to go back. We need to talk about their story. We need to understand their story. We need to capture the image that they're seeing and help them understand that their lens is dirty. You need to change out that lens and show them a new path towards strength, that everything that they've been through has brought them this immeasurable strength that they just don't even realize. And that's what that's what I think is what really helps me the most, is that understanding I am happy. I haven't had a bad day in 3 or 4 years, right? I am happy with myself. I'm happy with my story. I've been beaten. I've been shot at. I've been blown up. Like I lost my father. Like I've been beaten by a man that I didn't even know, right? But I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with my story because I did the work, right? I spent 24 years going back and hammering into myself that I don't have to go through this fight, like, and treat myself like garbage. I'm not garbage. I'm just a result of everything that's happened to me. So, I mean, I use other people, but at the end of the day, it's always me that's there for myself. So, thank you.
Hey, what do you think?
That's kind of hard for me because I don't really have a whole lot. I don't have a whole lot of family, friends, things to hold me down. To me, it would be just so easy to do it. I think that really the only thing that holds me back whenever I do get in that mindset or that headset is just fear of the other side. I mean, I really don't have anything that's, my mom would get over it, my sister would get over it, friends would get over it, you know. It's really just that fear. Wish I had a more, I don't know, a better answer, but not really a whole lot holding me back. Yeah, I promise I'm okay, by the way. That sounds I'm not actively suicidal. But yeah.
I think that's a perfect answer because it's honest, it's real, and this is what we all are here for, and the work that we're doing and what we need to hear. And if you would like 2 new moms and like a brother and a sister and a couple dogs in Philly, come on over.
Thank you.
Thank you for being honest. I think hearing that we don't all have things to hold on to sometimes is so valuable. We hear all the time, you know, just reach out, and it's like, okay, but what if I don't have anywhere to reach? What if then what, you know? And I think that's probably work we need to do. So thank you for that. How do y'all feel about taking some questions from the chat with the few minutes we have left? Is that okay? And just with the understanding that we are not going to answer questions we don't want
to. Let's do it.
Sounds good.
I want to speak up really quick. Like if people need to take a break, you can. The next session starts at 11. I know in the schedule we've got 10:50 to 11, but we can carry this into the break because I want to continue this conversation. But seriously, if you need to take care of yourself, go do that and you can come back.
Yeah. Does anyone want to get on the mic while I'm scrolling through the chat with a question?
Can I ask, when someone shares a story like Shay or an experience like Shay, some tools or resources on how to respond just in a supportive, helpful way instead of like hitting the panic button and like, oh my gosh, I have to, you know, my main instinct is I have to help, I have to solve her problems, I have to, you know, hit the panic button, and obviously that's not what anybody needs. So just tools and resources that we can use to respond in a manner that's helpful to everyone. And yes, like listening and being supportive, totally. I can understand that too. I think just, you know, thank you for sharing, or how can I, just a way to initiate a conversation with somebody that's not, you know, like fake, or, you know, there's only one you in the world. you're talking about, that would be a total loss. You know, like I just don't want it to feel inauthentic.
Yeah.
I think that one of the, I'm gonna hop in.
Do it.
One of the biggest things that I've heard from other people and myself is just acknowledging the pain that the person is going through is huge. Don't invalidate. You know, it's a lot of the times you want to go automatically to a positive thought or like, well, look at this, or here, happy thoughts, but that's just going to do the exact opposite of what you want it to do. Validating someone's pain, acknowledging it, and saying, oh my God, you know, I haven't been through that, but that sounds really hard. That connection that person will now have, you know, that's the biggest thing whenever you're suicidal or when you're having those thoughts, is you feel so isolated and you feel nobody else can grasp what you're feeling or the pain or can acknowledge it, and just really need that connection and validation.
I would like to say something, Dese'Rae. For me, I love everything, Shay, that you said. Yes, validate, acknowledge, but I'm going to tell you one of the biggest things that you should not do that I experience all the time. There's a stigma that goes along with people who express what they've gone through or discuss their mental illness, and they're out there. You have some people that begin to treat you differently, like you have a disease. And then it for some people, it changes their whole perspective of how they view you and how they treat you. We are still people. We still need love. We're still those amazing people that you know. It's just that we deal with our things silently. A lot of people don't realize it. And if we express it to you, just don't treat us differently. Just have empathy and love, and just know that we're human. Basically, yes.
I'd like to add one more thing in my own perspective. I've worked with a number of people as well that have literally been crushed by the diagnosis that they've been given, right? Like some people, I think the perception of being diagnosed with something is its own form of clinical judgment, right? So when you hear this idea or expression of this person in front of you for the first time, a lot of you look to solving the problem instantly, and you can't, right? You cannot solve their problems. The only person that can solve their problems is them, right? Because they are the only person that knows 100% of their context. They're the only person that's lived in their head for the 30 years that I've been alive. I'm the only person that knows, right? You can't solve their problems. You can't save everyone. You have to take the perspective of understanding that empathy requires listening, right? You must listen to this person that's in front of you and not judge them for what they're telling you in the moment. You have to take a step back and understand that they have this whole life that you will never understand. And all you can do is literally listen to their story, genuinely want to listen, right? I cannot give you a better skill that will help people more than just listening to their story and not speaking, right? You should empower and validate everything that I want you to speak. I want you to tell me. I want you to expose this stuff to me. I'm just here to listen to you. I'm here to just listen. And I think that's the most powerful thing that you can do for someone.
Hot sauce in my basement. Do we have another question? What I wanted to say, this is terrible. What I wanted to say was, I think they call that the writing reflex, that immediate need to jump into action. And I know that it comes, oh my God, I know that it comes naturally to so many of us. I know that it comes naturally to so many of us, but it's just sitting in that. And I've had a lot of practice with it, with the project, sitting with it and waiting. And I mean, I think if you respond authentically, then you're going to be authentic, you know, like you can even say, that was really scary to hear. And then go back to the other person. Don't make it about you, but say that was hard. You know, what can we do? How can we make this better? And just, you know, really focus on that support, and sitting in that fear. What else do we got?
Hi, I have a question for Dylan. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the state of mental health services for veterans. I know that's a population that is hugely affected by mental illness, and you know, when you talk about stigma, I think that's a tough population to sort of accept help. So if you could just speak a little bit about what your experience has been, maybe receiving help or getting help and reaching out to others who are veterans.
That is a tough field. I will say that. That is, I myself am still, right, like I'm still stepping into the realm of being open and honest about what I've faced in realistically, like I still serve, right? Like I put myself out there on social media and talking about the very thing that a majority of veterans will never talk about. So the one thing I would say is that leadership within the military often sucks at empathy, right? That's just a blatantly honest answer. They don't understand it, right? Because we have a job to do. Because I see things from two different perspectives, right? One, I'm a life coach. I help people literally help them save their own lives. Two, I'm an infantryman. I'm literally put out in the front lines to kill people, right? That's the unfortunate nature of the jobs that I do, right? I am in two different worlds. When I am doing infantryman stuff, right, I have to suffer in silence sometimes, because when I put my pain out in front of my soldiers, right, that brings down morale in a point, right? Like if I'm in Afghanistan, I have to suffer in silence because then the mission comes first, because lives around me could end, right? If I do the wrong thing because I'm struggling and I start talking about suicide in front of guys when I'm on mission, right? I can't do that. So there's a stigma within the military and the training itself that you have to suffer in silence. You have to, because it's mission focused. And then when you get out of the military, there is no explanation of how that impacts people. There is no explanation of what it means to step into a civilian realm and step out of this idea that I have to suffer in silence for the rest of the team. Because when you get out, people don't understand what it is like to step into the idea of killing someone, right? And there's not many people that will ever understand that if you have never been there. It's the empathy side of things, right? It's just a very, like, veterans only talk to veterans. That's the reality, right? Those guys will not and do not talk to people that don't know what it's like to be in Afghanistan or Iraq or Vietnam or World War II, right? Because how do you express the things that we've seen, right? Like I've seen a man with one arm, and that was it. That was what he came off the helicopter with. How am I supposed to express that and explain that to people that don't understand what that looks like for the first time, right? That I'm seeing this man, right, a brother in arms, like an American soldier. He's a big black dude, probably 6'3", 6'4". He was whiter than snow because he had no blood, right? He was dead in front of me. The VA doesn't step into that realm and give people the opportunity to express themselves instantaneously, right? And that's oftentimes what is needed. They're typically, like, VA waits are 3 to 6 months minimum sometimes, right? If you're getting a referral for mental health, it might be 2 months or more. And that's just the hard reality, is that we don't have a system in place for veterans specifically that can support them, because we don't have enough veterans stepping into a place like this and leading them from the front and saying it's okay to talk about mental health. Like my team that I have 30 people, I talk with them regularly about this stuff, but there are not leaders like me around the military, and that's what I'm trying to change. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Thanks, Dylan. All right, we do need to wrap it up because it's 11:01 now. I'm really sorry we took you all the way through the break, and if you're joining the next session, you'll just get a little bit of a bathroom break. But I know these conversations can continue for a very, very long time. I'm sure Janine, Dylan, Shay, even Des would be happy to continue conversation via email or however you want to reach out. So please continue those conversations. I'll save the chat. If we missed any major questions, I can send them to those folks. And please chat in if you have not already for your continuing education hours. And again, that's only for people who need their continuing ed for their license. So sorry to rush us to an end. I wish we could continue, but thank you so much, Dylan, Shay, Janine, especially Des. Thank you so much for facilitating and your incredible keynote. You're all amazing.
Thank you. Next year, gotta give this an hour.
I know. We've tried many different options. So we'll talk for next year. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the next sessions. If you're not able to attend the next sessions, please complete the conference evaluation. So that'll be on the session gallery. All right.
Thank you. Love
everybody.
You all. Thank you.
Love you. Bye, Janine. Bye, everybody.